The next few modules will break down offer and acceptance, one way of establishing mutual assent to a bargain. This module is going to focus on the offer. We learned in section 22 of the restatement that the ordinary way that mutual assent comes about is through one party, the offeror, making an offer to the other party, the offeree, and the offeree accepting that offer. The offer is defined in section 24 of the restatement. This is a particularly important section, and it deserves our close attention. As we've previously discussed, modern law is based on an objective approach to contracts. Therefore, the question of whether an offer has been made focuses on the offeror's acts that have been communicated to the offeree. Acts such as oral or written statements, or perhaps physical acts like nodding one's head. The question comes down to whether such acts would be viewed by a reasonable person as indicating the offeror's willingness to enter into a bargain. An offeror's subjective state of mind is basically irrelevant to whether or not an offer has been made. A common maxim of contracts law is that the offeror is the master of the offer. This means that she can propose whatever terms she desires to be a part of the offer. Of course, the offeree is free to accept or reject those terms. Section 24 further states that to be an offer, the offeror's proposal must invite acceptance from the offeree. Moreover, that section tells us that to constitute an offer, the offeror's proposal must be in terms that create a reasonable understanding that if the offeree does accept, a contract will be formed without any further approval on the part of the offeror. Let's explore the idea of creating a reasonable understanding that acceptance by the offeree will conclude the bargain by using an analogy of a tennis game. For an offer to have been made, the offeror's communication must lead the offeree to believe that the ball is now in her court, and that she now holds the power of acceptance. If an offer has been made, all the offeree has to do to create a contract is to say, in effect, yes. A bargain is completed. No further act of the offeror is required. Moreover, once the offeree accepts an offer, the offeror has lost the power to revoke or change the offer. The requirement that an offer create a reasonable understanding in the offeree that his acceptance will form a contract is what distinguishes an offer from mere preliminary negotiations, an overture to an offer, which is defined in section 26 of the restatement. Therefore, if, in her communication, the offeror reserves the final power to say whether she will be bound by the contract, that communication is not an offer, but merely preliminary negotiations. The hallmark of the offer is putting the power to create the contract in the offeree's court. One critical requirement of an offer is that the terms specified by the offeror be reasonably certain. This requirement is set forth in section 33 of the restatement. Thus, if one party says to the other, "I'm interested in selling my car to you," in all likelihood, a court would not interpret that statement to be an offer because a critical term, the price, is left uncertain. Rather, it would probably be considered to be an invitation to the other party to make an offer, to propose a price at which it would be willing to buy the car. Discussions like this are preliminary negotiations under section 26 of the restatement. Thus, one critical factor that distinguishes preliminary negotiations from an offer is whether the communication from one party to the other sets forth the essential terms of the proposed deal, terms like price, quantity, and date on which performance is to take place. that would lead the other party to believe that an unequivocal offer has been proposed. The reason given by the restatement for the certainty requirement is that if one party sues the other for breach of contract, a court must be in position to determine what the terms of the alleged contract are in order to decide whether there has been a breach of that contract and what an appropriate remedy should be for that breach. If the terms of the offer are uncertain, a court will not be in a position to determine whether there has been a breach and to decide upon appropriate remedy. So what is the effect of the offerors making an offer to the offeree? Section 35 of the restatement explains that once an offer has been made, the power to accept the offer and thereby create a contract shifts to the offeree. We're going to explore acceptance in the next module. But we learn in Section 36 of the restatement that the offeror can short-circuit the offeree's power to accept by revoking the offer before the offeree accepts the offer. Section 42 of the restatement explains that the offeror can revoke the offer by communicating to the offeree her intent that the offer no longer be effective. Notice that a revocation does not result simply from the offeror sending out a communication indicating her desire to revoke the offer. To be effective, the revocation must be received by the offeree. Nonetheless, Section 43 makes clear that if the offeree learns through indirect channels that the offeror no longer desires the offer to be effective, that knowledge will also serve as an effective revocation of the offer. Let's assume that Adam makes an offer to sell his boat to Eve for $50,000. Eve says she needs some time to think about it and will get back to him in the morning. That afternoon, Sally approaches Adam and offers to buy his boat for $60,000. Adam immediately says, "It's a deal." Adam has accepted Sally's offer and a contract comes into being between Adam and Sally. Assume that Sally calls Eve that evening and says that she's just bought Adam's boat. Under Section 43, Eve's power to accept Adam's offer is terminated because she has acquired information that Adam took an action, selling the boat to another person, that is inconsistent with Adam's having an intention to enter into a bargain with Eve. Eve's receiving notice of Adam selling the boat to Sally operates as a revocation of Adam's offer to sell the boat to Eve. But note, Adam's action in accepting Sally's offer without first revoking the offer he made to Eve is very unwise and potentially dangerous. If Eve had not learned that Adam sold the boat to another person, and in the morning had sent Adam an email saying that she accepted his offer, a contract would immediately come into existence between Adam and Eve. In effect, Adam would have entered into two separate enforceable contracts to sell his only boat. In such a case, Adam would be forced to breach one of the two contracts and in all likelihood would be held liable to pay monetary damages to the disappointed buyer who did not receive the boat.